things that I'm checking.
So you are on 2 devices, or are you doing it
No,
on the
no, it's
same?
through one.
So you'll be taking in questions from the YouTube live as well, right?
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
lot for you to do at the same time.
yeah. So I'll see. I forgot to ask my colleague to kind of be there, but hopefully they will.
We can see this as a test run and then later
Yeah.
see
Okay,
what
so
we
we
do
are
next.
live on Facebook,
Okay.
and let me check if we have reached. Yeah, we are on. One second. For those of you watching, we're just going live in a couple of minutes. So yeah, I think we should be fine. Just need to make sure that my age constraints on YouTube are set up.
That's true.
Okay, so let's go live. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We know we are going through a very difficult time, and we've been hearing feedback from people, and we thought that we would help address some of the issues around emotional health. And we're doing this as a 2 bilingual series. So every Tuesdays, we will talk on steps to emotional health and address different aspects. And every Thursday, we will discuss the same issue in Hindi, Mansik Swasthya ke liye tips. So if, depending on your level of comfort, you can join either of the 2 sessions or both of them. We are keeping them short. We'll keep them to about 30 minutes, and we will address questions as we go. But if we can't, kind of address them in the current topic, we will also address them in the follow-up sessions the following week, right? So, and we are live on 2 platforms. We are on Facebook Live as well as YouTube Live, so you can watch it on either of the 2 streams. Today's topic is we are addressing the issue of negative news onslaught that we face and feel overwhelmed by, and how we can stop doom scrolling. And if you're new to this term of doom scrolling, you will understand that as we go along. Our guest tonight, our panelist tonight, is Havovi Bhagwagar, who has been on PatientsEngage webinars earlier as well. And she's an experienced psychologist and therapist. And I will be moderating the session. I'm Aparna Mittal. I'm the founder of CEO and CEO of PatientsEngage. As I said, quick, for those of you who don't know us, we are an online platform, and we've been doing, we believe in informing and engaging and empowering both, patients, caregivers, families, and managing various chronic conditions as well as difficult situations. So I won't go too much into that, but also a reminder that tomorrow we will discuss the same topic, Vyapak Nakaratmak खबरों और निरंतर सर्फिंग के चक्र से कैसे निपटे. Not tomorrow, sorry, on Thursday. Same time, 7 p.m. So just remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays we will be live with on on various topics of emotional well-being. And again, these are not going to replace your individual consultations, but these are general guidelines for you to be able to proactively take care of your own emotional well-being. And if you're logged into Zoom, you can put the questions on Q&A. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can post them there. And you can always write and share your questions on editor@patientsengage.com. We will take them up, and you can reach us on any of our social media platforms. So I won't take too much of time. Just a reminder that the next week we will address the issue of understanding and managing anxiety. So again, be prepared to uh, to be there for that. So I think, as we all know, we are surrounded by illness, we're surrounded by tragedies. As somebody said, the sirens of ambulance is very, very overwhelming. And there's a strong sense of doom, but we can't switch off our televisions, we can't switch off our phones. Um, we want to be able to respond to as many requests that are there, but we also find it very difficult to continue to do that. Um, so let's try and understand what we are going through a little bit, and what we can do to address the situation. So Havovi, if you can start with this terminology that's come up in, I think it's fairly new, called doom scrolling and doom surfing. So if we can kind of explain that to our audience.
So, hi Aparna, and hello to all our viewers. It's nice to be here back on the platform. I think Aparna, we've done two webinars last year during the 2020 pandemic, but I think things are different now. So I hope we can cover some of the differences that we can see as well between last year and this year. Just down to doom scrolling. Yeah, it's a new terminology. There's research on it though. It simply means reading or scrolling through negative news continuously. It could be on phones, it could be through social media feeds. But definitely what researchers have been finding is that COVID-19 has been the most searched activity on Google since March 2020. And related news also has been equally searched. So it's called doom scrolling because when we are constantly faced with negative news, we do have a feeling of doom, a sense that things are really worse than they are. And we hope through today's talk that we can educate you how to be able to navigate through this, how to be able to manage the stress that comes from all the negative news that we are surrounded with. And none of us are exempt from it because it's a global crisis. So many other crises that we see around us are usually localized to regions. And often we don't feel that personally involved. But we feel so personally involved with this crisis because it is global, it's affecting each of us, and any of us could be affected next. We don't know who can be affected. So, which is why doom scrolling has taken on so much, you can say, like pandemic like proportions in the last month or two as well.
And why do we do it? Is it just a bad habit, as people sometimes think of it, or is it a coping mechanism? Why do we kind of continue to do it, even though at the end of it, or even while we are doing it, we're kind of not feeling good about it?
So, let's think about it from the viewpoint of the 1918 Spanish flu, which is our reference point to this pandemic, right? That was a major world disaster, which is very similar to what we are going through right now. The big difference, of course, there are many other differences, but the big difference was that there was no access to news the way it is today, right?
Hmm.
Forget about having even available newspapers that gave information. Uh, any critical information about government policies or about protocols were all delivered via postmen, Boy Scouts, teachers who came door to door and gave you a roll of paper. And that's when you knew what the new government norm was. Now, cut to today, where we actually have an infodemic, right? Right in March 2020, WHO had termed this an infodemic because just like the virus was spreading rapidly, information was also spreading just as rapidly. And the fact that we have so much information present at our fingertips, but we are not really in the physically endangered as such, but we could be at some point. We're using that information as a way to keep ourselves safe. Evolutionarily, our brain is designed to keep us safe. So let's say, Aparna, we open the newspaper on any day. I'm not saying it's during pandemic, but non-pandemic time also. And let's say there's a piece of information that's talking about, say, a sexual assault or a flood somewhere or something like that. And on another column talks about someone receiving an award. Our eyes are going to get magnetized to the sexual assault or the natural disaster because our brain is constantly checking to see how it can keep us safe. So, in a time like this, when really our physical safety is in danger, consider the months of April and May, how they have been. Each of us are in a place where we want to have certainty. Is this
Right.
going to happen to us? When is it going to end? When are we going to get vaccines? Or when is the government going to make efforts to make sure that we have enough of medical supplies? We want information because that keeps us safe. And that then leads to constantly checking for updates. It's a way to establish certainty. It's a way to kind of bring in safety into our lives. Yeah. And there's some research that also says that because of the very bleak nature of the times that we are living in, many of us feel a sense of low mood, high fatigue levels. We don't have an interest in activities. And guess what gives us that dopamine uh, uplift? It's the news, right? So some researchers have even termed negative news as a mood upregulator. So it kind of helps us to suddenly feel a sense of uh, sort of a crisis mode of, oh, this is happening and that is happening, and XYZ government is not doing enough, or this party didn't do its job, or this is not available, or that happened to some family somewhere. So you see, it gives you that immediate rush in
Mm.
the short term, in the
Right.
short term. Yeah.
Right.
But when there's
Right.
excessive dopamine secreted in our systems, we do know what happens. There's sleep problems, there are difficulties with appetite, there are problems with
Can you
relationships.
speak up a little bit? I think it's a little faint.
Can you hear me now, Aparna?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, better?
Yeah. Better.
So, when dopamine levels are secreted in large quantities in our brain, in the short term, it makes us feel good. So, it's an
Mm.
upregulator in
Right.
that sense. But in the long
Mm.
run, the negative impact is a lot. So there are also a few other reasons that we scroll through media. And when we
Mm.
scroll through negative news, researchers have found that a number of cognitive biases operate. So what are cognitive biases? Thinking errors. They are like,
Mm.
you keep certain glasses on or specs on, and then you view the world through that perception. And then you
Mm.
only take in information from the world that confirms whatever you are initially perceiving. One of the
Mm.
main reasons people keep scrolling through news is something called an optimism bias.
Mm.
Like I hear from so many people saying, "Ye kab khatam hoga."
Mm.
So a huge peg for going back to negative news is to find something positive.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so numbers are falling, vaccines are available, etc., etc. The problem is that when they are scrolling through positive news, they're going to go through realms of negative news. And
Mm.
unfortunately, they're not going to find anything to confirm their bias. And that leads to you're left hanging going back. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself.
Sorry, Habo, we are kind of losing you. You've frozen. We'll just wait for her to come back. Yeah, I think,
Am I back?
yes, you're back now. Yeah, if you
My,
can speak up a little.
yeah, my
Yeah.
connection. You can hear me now?
Yes. Yes, now we
Hello?
can. Yes, we can. Can you hear
Okay.
us? Can you hear me? I think we've lost her.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. I think there's a bit of a lag for a bit.
Give me a second, yeah. Is it better?
Yeah, it's
Am
better.
I?
Lost you again.
Whoops.
Okay, I just heard your oops.
I think there's a slight lag.
There's a slight lag, yes. I think now that sentence was better, so hopefully it's better now.
I hope so.
It's still a
Hello?
yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a lag.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe you
I hope
continue.
it picks up.
Yeah, maybe you just speak a little slower
Yeah.
so that
So just we catch up. Can you hear me now?
uh yes, but I think the lag is still there.
Yes, I think so too.
Hmm.
So I'll speak a little slowly.
Yeah, yeah,
There are biases and there is a mood up regulator reason, which is why we do doom scrolling. So just,
right.
yeah, that's just the, you can say in a nutshell, that's what happens.
Okay. And is there what is the, I guess, even short-term or medium-term effect of doom scrolling or continuously watching negative news?
So the American Psychological Association found way before the pandemic too
Hmm.
that that people tend to react quite negatively to watching negative news continuously. And
Hmm.
they studied this not just in adults but in children too, and similar effects were found in children as well.
Right.
So the first area that suffers is our empathy tends to reduce when we watch a lot of negative news. We
Hmm.
tend to become actually less sensitive to other people's suffering.
Right.
Yeah, and if you look at the visuals,
God, we've lost you again.
okay.
Hello?
Hello, Aparna, your
Yeah.
screen is blank.
No, I think it must be you. I'm still here.
Okay. My network bars are full. I'm not sure where the issue is.
Um, Sorry to our audience, just facing a little bit of a tech issue. Um, but I think maybe now you're better. Can you see me and hear me?
I I can hear you and see you.
Okay, all right. So yeah, if you can talk about the effect of uh, doom scrolling once again.
So
Do you want
lost
to,
you again.
yeah, do you want to try going off video?
Uh,
And I know it's not ideal, but
uh, I'll just stop it and see. Will it work?
sure.
Is this better?
Yeah, I think the
Can you hear
audio
me?
is better. Yeah, it's not ideal.
Okay. I know it's not ideal.
Mm,
Hmm. Um, so I'll just talk about maybe quickly what are the effects.
right,
I think the first effect is that if we continue watching the kind of visuals that we watch, as the
right,
APA or the American Psychological Association says, we become less sensitive to other people's suffering. And particularly so when we keep watching visuals that are disturbing, we tend to
mm,
have a kind of apathy set in.
right,
And the effect of constantly doom scrolling is also we become more fearful of the world. We become more anxious. And we are
right,
also likely to behave in more aggressive and hurtful ways.
right. Okay.
So instead of the doom scrolling actually giving us a sense of certainty, it increases our
Hmm.
levels of uncertainty. So we are
Right.
constantly anticipating that we're going to hit on some positive news. So we keep scrolling. We keep
Hmm.
in anticipation of elevating our low mood. So we keep scrolling. It becomes a constant, endless cycle. And
Right.
instead of giving us control over our environment, it actually makes us lose control. And what's even worse is that we don't really consume accurate news.
Right.
We become vulnerable to consuming incomplete information or
Hmm.
inaccurate news. So this decreases our sense of control rather than increase it. And then, of course, doom scrolling has those impacts on our mood, where we might maybe lose focus on important tasks we need to complete. Our
Hmm.
sleep could be impacted. Our relationships with others get impacted. I've heard about people falling out over polarized views regarding
Right.
pandemic management. And that's
Right.
because one person has a bias, about, say, one aspect of the pandemic, and another person has a bias about another aspect.
Hmm.
Both may not be wrong, but they both just consumed news that confirms the bias they have.
Correct.
And that
Correct.
unfortunately creates friction. So I've heard of fallouts happening continuously in the last month and a half. So we have to be quite careful about what we are consuming and how.
Right. Right. And often the advice that is given is that, you know, you should restrict the amount of time you spend on these platforms or on your phone, or you should just, leave your phone or switch off your TV. But is that even a reasonable expectation?
These the views about scrolling through news, even if you read people's views on Twitter or other social media, you'll see that they are completely polarized. One school of
Hmm.
thought advocates that you completely need to shut out, right?
Right. Right.
And another school of thought advocates that you shouldn't do that. Now, if we just look at research and just solid facts, what emerges from studying people who keep watching the news is
Hmm.
that psychological findings show that if you build resilience and optimism, you cope better with bad news.
Hmm.
So, in a time like this, where we are in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, to tell somebody, turn off your phone 2 hours before bedtime,
Hmm.
nobody's going to listen to that, right? A crisis call can come right in the middle of the night. Nobody is
Right.
going to turn their phones off. It's not advisable to. You and
Hmm.
I wouldn't do that either, right?
Right.
So it's utopian thinking to believe we can do that at a time like this. Uh, I think it's more ideal that we build that muscle of resilience and optimism.
Hmm.
So, in fact, there is a cross-cultural study that was done in the US that found that people who were optimists, that is, they had a high level of trust, they were people who had rational thinking, they actually experienced less fear when they consumed negative news.
Hmm.
And they were, in fact, more likely to follow public health measures.
Hmm.
So, if we cultivate optimism, because optimism isn't something we are born with,
Hmm.
it's obviously something we can cultivate, you can cope with news better. So that's what I feel.
Okay. But is there any merit in, at least trying to reduce, the
Yes,
scrolling and surfing and the news watching? And if yes, how?
it's a lot. I think it's a lot like cultivating any healthy habit. Junk food, for example, there are advocates that say completely cut it out of your life. And
Hmm.
we know that none of us will do that. We may tell
Hmm.
the world we do, but we don't, right? But we learn how to moderate our our junk food eating. So we
Right.
eat it in moderation. We balance it with healthy eating, and we avoid addictive substances.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what we need to do with our digital diet as well. So, there's a concept of creating digital hygiene,
Hmm.
which won't happen overnight, but has to happen across a period of time.
Right.
So, so if we are using the digital world a lot and we're using our tablets and phones and various devices, we need to moderate the amount of time we spend. So you can do small measures like turning off your notifications for news apps on your phone. It may cut
Hmm.
down the amount of, concentration or focus you have in that direction. You
Right.
could decide not to use your smartphone as an alarm clock, and if you're not expecting a crisis, you can put it into flight mode and sleep.
Hmm.
You can also have short durations of structured time. So, if I share my own example, there are two times when I've been affected really badly with the news. One was when the Taj attacks happened, 26/11. I
Right.
remember I was much younger then, of course. I remember not even sleeping through the night. I would
Hmm.
have the TV on through the night as well, right? And it impacted my mood, my general alertness very much. The
Hmm.
second time I saw this happen was last year when the pandemic hit us, and I was constantly consuming news.
Hmm.
So, and I saw the impact on myself. Being a psychologist, I'm my own laboratory. So
Right.
I check out what happens to me before I go and tell someone else.
Right.
So I found that if I consume news twice a day in small portions, it's much more manageable for me.
Right.
And I have never followed people's advice that say switch off your TV, cut off your TV channel subscription. I'd say
Hmm.
no. I can develop that resilience in myself to decide what I can take in and what I can't. So
Hmm.
definitely accessing online platforms or TV news, maybe in structured durations twice a day. What's most important is if you're going to become digital addicts, we need to make sure that we don't have too much of news consumption and we balance that out with offline activities.
Hmm.
So, cultivating that whole optimism bit, to do that, we need to do the things that make us optimistic, which is gratitude,
Hmm.
doing things that help other people, seeking out social support when we are feeling sad or low rather than looking for news to uplift us, searching for people that we can talk to and have very deep, meaningful conversations with, taking
Hmm.
care of our health, engaging in exercise and healthy eating. So,
Hmm.
all of the things that develop a sense of resilience and optimism, and engaging in offline activities that serve as a substitute, reading, playing board games with the family, cooking, gardening, anything that helps you. So, it has to be two-pronged. You cut down your digital consumption and you increase your offline activities.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Um, okay. So the key thing in your view is to do these activities to build resilience and optimism, and to also on the other
absolutely.
side try and minimize, the activities that kind of counter optimism.
Absolutely. True.
Right. And just for our audience, if you have any questions, we can take them as well very quickly. Um, in terms of, I know this keeps getting told quite often that uh, maintain a gratitude journal, or you know that's always helpful, but sometimes it can be extremely difficult, especially in the times that we are going through, and if you are specifically personally affected, or affected in close surroundings. I think people are finding it quite difficult to uh, go through that process of you know finding things to be grateful about. um, what is your suggestion on that?
Don't force yourself to do it. I think that's the most important thing. And there is no one size fits all.
Hmm.
If you go to see Aparna, each of us have gratitude in some way during the day, even if we don't journal about it.
Hmm.
And so the idea of any kind of positive psychology as a huge field is for you to focus on things that are balancing your view of the world,
Right.
and
Right.
especially during times of crisis. So when I have worked on sites of disasters, whether they have been with earthquakes or floods,
Hmm.
it's not like we only speak about the bad feelings, nor do we jump into the crisis scene and tell everybody start meditating. It's
Right.
about finding what suits you and makes you feel best. So for some
Hmm.
people, that could be coloring, cooking,
Sorry, we lost you again.
Whoops.
Yeah, you're
I'm
back.
so sorry about, yeah.
You're back.
So there's no one size fits all. Um, the goal should be to focus on things that make you feel good
Right.
and that help you feel good in the long run, not just excited in the short run. So if you tell a person to do a grammar exercise versus watch Netflix, guess what they'll pick up. So it's a matter of finding a
Hmm.
balance and discipline.
Right. Okay. And if
Yeah,
you had
I
to
think,
kind of, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was saying, I think the network is quite bad.
Yeah, today, unfortunately, we're having,
It's so sad. I know. Give me a second. I'm going to just, Aparna, just a second. I'm going to switch to another network.
sure. Yeah, we'll go through that. And in the meantime, if anyone in the audience has any comments or any questions or any concerns, please do send us a chat message.
Are there any questions, any live ones or anything we can take?
Yeah, no, I'm just checking. I think at the moment, not yet. I know a couple of people have said that you know they should avoid doom scrolling, but that's about it at the moment. I think the one question I have is that if we had to tell people to kind of do one thing a day, or one step that they can take to kind of get on the right track, what would that one step be?
Well, that one step would definitely be if you're having a shared family and you have a TV ongoing through the day, or you watch TV news together, then make an effort jointly as a family to decide only a couple of times a day that the news will run at home.
Hmm.
So one of the feedback I get from not just my clients but my immediate ecosystem is as well is that people keep the news on from the morning and it goes on till evening. And
Right.
sometimes it's just constantly in the background. This is
Right.
something I saw when the pandemic started. It's again something I'm hearing about. So one of the
Right.
things you can do is monitor that.
Hmm.
uh, Please remember that when it comes to news channels, it's extremely important that the content that they give out is visually disturbing.
Hmm.
So that is something you're not going to find so much when you're scrolling through, you know, digital news or on the newspaper. That
Right.
your brain tends to soak in and absorb images, and that impacts mood and sleep much more than other things.
Right.
Even with children, when we look at their when they look at how they are impacted by critical events, they're usually impacted by the images they remember of those events, typically
Hmm.
through consuming news in a
Right.
secondary manner. Children
Right.
as toddlers as young as 1 and 2 get impacted.
Hmm.
So we have to be careful about television, and I'd say that's the first thing. Please section out the time that you spend on TV news.
So I think on that, one of the challenges we hear from families is, especially if it's multi-generational, then you have one generation kind of watching it on television, and typically the older generation, the younger generation is on their
Hmm.
phones or laptops. So it's kind of it's not typically the same person kind of being on multiple channels, although WhatsApp is another one. Do you
Yeah,
have any tips for WhatsApp, which is not
I
kind of doom scrolling it's a different way, right, where you get this bombard, and especially we did have this whole situation of being bombarded with the requests for kind of oxygen concentrators or hospital bed, etc. So and there was a strong sense of feeling very overwhelmed by the fact that there are so many requests, and you kind of want to be on top of it because you might need it in a few days time possibly, so you kind of don't want to disengage completely. Plus also you kind of feel guilty about not being responsive to those messages, right? So any advice or tips for that?
What I found was that things went haywire when the oxygen problem or the crisis worsened, and
mm,
everybody was working in an unstructured fashion. The first,
mm.
I think, 3 or 4 days, nobody knew what they were doing. All they were doing was copy pasting and then forwarding somewhere and
Correct, correct.
not really checking and things like that. I think it's become a little more organized now. Most people
Mm,
have realized there are one or two go-to people that they can forward those messages to. So even this has become more streamlined and more organized, which says a lot for our resilience.
mm,
At the same time, Aparna, there are vulnerable people around,
mm.
especially the older generation who've grown up in the times of Doordarshan and one
Right.
single newspaper, who really do believe everything they read. And of course, there are neurocognitive deficits as well, which make
Mm,
them more vulnerable. But the fact remains that they are the group that needs some education.
mm,
So to have a family member who's a trusted source that the elderly can send the message to fact check, or
mm.
to even teach the family member that there are these fact checker websites into which they can post the link and check whether it's authentic information or not.
Right.
And if they are tying up somebody with a resource for oxygen, bed, ambulance, whatsoever, then to make sure that they are doing it through a channel or are verifying the source themselves.
Mm,
So the elderly are definitely the population we need to target here. And not to say that the people in the 18 to 44 age group or 50 age group don't do this,
right.
uh, but they are a little more digitally informed than the
Mm,
older generation. So
right.
WhatsApp needs to be pruned. And though there has been a lot that admins need to do, last year there was a lot of advocacy for that. The Supreme Court feels what will an admin do also of a
Correct, correct.
WhatsApp group? They can't hold them responsible legally. So
Hmm.
it's up to each one of us what we are consuming.
Hmm.
So are there any other questions? Maybe we could take it.
No, I think that's all for now. Um, I think again a reminder for everybody that uh, on Thursday we will be doing the same discussion in Hindi, and next week Tuesday we'll be back to talk about handling anxiety, which I think is really growing at the moment. Any final words, Awobi, for our audience?
The audience is, I think all of us are in a state of crisis. Months of April and May, this kind of humanitarian crisis, I think none of us have ever experienced.
Hmm.
So take a lot of care of yourselves. Watch out, because as the weeks unfold, Aparna, we are going to see uh, the enormity sink in. So we know that there are going to be mental health issues. So just watch out for that. We'll of course speak about it more in detail the next week.
Correct.
Take good care of yourselves. Uh, the information that you are getting around you is not always the wisest way to keep on top of the game. Simple thing, the simplest things, like spending 5-10 minutes with your family, with yourself, are far more enriching. So just take care of the basics, yeah, and do what's in your control.
Hmm.
That sense of hopelessness and that sense of control that all of us are trying to get back. We're trying to look at it in the wrong way.
Right.
We're approaching it backwards. So we need to act on our environment, which means act on the things that are in our control.
Right.
And our sleep, our health, our family, our relationships, and the people we can support in our immediate ecosystem is in our control.
Right.
So go ahead and do that and take good care of yourselves.
Right. And again, thank you everyone for watching. And if you have any requests for topics that you would want us to consider over the next few weeks, please do send us your questions. We can address specific questions, or if it's worth a whole episode, we are uh, you know uh, willing to consider that and uh, address that as well. So thank you everyone, and thank you, and stay safe. And yeah, wishing everyone as well as we can. So thank you, Thawovi.